And good evening once again, everybody. Welcome to another Hoops HD Monday evening Racket, uh, where we talk about all the major conferences, the goings-on in college basketball, and anything else we decide is relevant for that evening. I'm your host, again, streaming to you live from the heart of Big Ten country here in snowy New Jersey, Chad Sherwood. With us, first of all, as always, is our resident puppetologist, David Griggs. David, how are you tonight?
Fine. It is above freezing. There is no snow, so screw you.
Thanks a lot. As I'm ready to get about 10 inches here.
Yeah.
We also have a special guest joining us tonight, the owner and publisher of WarrenNolan.com, Warren Nolan himself. Warren, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Great, and it's great to have you here.
Yeah.
What I have to say, first of all, is that as a college basketball fan, there's only about 2 or 3 sites that I think you really need to pay attention to, and for me, for the several years now, Warren's site has been one of those. It is a site where you can get live scores and, even more importantly, live RPI updates, literally within seconds, if maybe minutes, maybe even seconds of a game going final. His RPI numbers are updated to the minute, strength of schedule, everything. Warren, I have to say that personally, I love your site.
Yeah, it is the best basic layout of basic critical information. It's great. It's easier on the eyes than the actual nitty-gritty. It really is.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
And anybody that has not seen his site, first of all, we'd recommend that you do go there to WarrenNolan.com. You not only do college basketball, I know you have football, women's basketball, college baseball. Warren, how did you become such a big college sports fan? I guess is there I can't even speak tonight. A particular college that you follow, or?
Well, it's sort of like you want to mention it. Yeah. Well, I went to Southern Illinois, so
The Salukis.
their prime time is sort of over now, right?
Yeah.
I'm just excited if they win a game.
Well, as a Rutgers fan, I know the exact feeling, and I think you've been in the NCAA tournament a lot more recently than I have. So.
Yeah, but Barry Henson, I thought he'd be getting it going there, but it's taking a little longer than I thought. But anyway.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm also a OU fan, so
okay.
I'll be okay.
Yeah, they're having a pretty decent year, I think. Warren, one other thing I wanted to bring up here, you have on your site not only the RPI numbers, you also have what you call the Nolan Power Index, which is your own formulation, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's my own formulation. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's similar to the RPI. But what I did kind of for myself was I added in a margin of victory, and it's sort of capped. I give a few bonus points for you win over a few possessions, and then at about 20 points it caps for college basketball. So I just wanted to kind of see how that would do, if it made a difference. I thought it would probably bring some teams to the top. It follows the polls pretty well, but it's not the greatest ranking out there either.
I was wondering
sorry to say.
I just wonder if you found that your rating is more accurate when it comes compared to the final brackets, less accurate, or just kind of about the same and just another tool that can be used.
Personally, I'm gonna continue to tweak the Nolan Power Index, but the RPI is it's a better predictor to a point. So I just stick with that, and when I come up with the holy grail of power indexes, I'll let you know.
Well, let us know. That would be great. You've also run projected final conference standings and a bracket projection. I saw that you actually did one today here, and maybe this can segue right on into the actual schools. I noticed in your projection you did today, you had, I think as everybody else in the country does, Kentucky, Virginia, and Duke as 1 seeds, but your fourth 1 seed, interestingly, was Villanova. And those that haven't, like the media bracket that recently came out, went with Wisconsin. Is there a reason why you went with Villanova?
Well, I mean, one thing I'd say is I mean, I think almost everybody, the 1s and 2 seeds are real easy right now. Everybody that's 1 and 2, those 8 teams are pretty solid across the board. I had, when I got to the 3rd and 4th, I mean, some people are putting Gonzaga in. I don't have a problem with Villanova, Duke, Gonzaga, Wisconsin. They're all right there kind of as the 4th. I mean, what do you guys think about those?
I think Villanova certainly has a strong profile. They're the top team in the number 2 conference by, I think, 2 games now in the standings. So if you're doing it categorically, that's typically a 1 seed, and they have wins. At VCU, at Butler, at Providence. Butler and Providence, I think, are a combined 27-5 at home or whatever it is. So they're going to get a lot of credit for that. The one thing that I think is going to work against them, and I don't know how you do it, Warren, if you try and guess the committee or if you just try and act like you are the committee, there is such a thing as the NABC rankings, which closely mirrors the human polls, the AP and the top 25. And what it is, it's one coach from each conference that routinely meets with the committee and answers questions about teams in their geographic region. Because Gonzaga is so high in the AP and coaches poll, I think that they would be favored in those polls as well. So even though the rest of their paper might be lacking, they don't have as many quality wins as a lot of the rest of the teams on the top 2 lines, I still could see them getting the 1 seed simply because of that.
I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, even in the coaches poll today, Gonzaga got 1 first-place vote.
Yeah.
That sort of surprised me, but okay.
Yeah. I think there's one voter out there that is refusing to rank Kentucky for whatever reason. He was voting Virginia for quite a while, and now he's switched over to the Zags.
I'm having a brain cramp. Who's St. Mary's coach? He's the one that has the vote for the West Coast Conference. I don't think he likes Gonzaga too much, so it probably wasn't him.
Randy Bennett?
Yeah, Randy, thank you. I'm having a brain cramp here.
The issue this year I have with Villanova is I think that Villanova has a 1 seed profile right now any other year. We seem to have more teams that appear that they are good enough for a 1 seed this year than I remember in any year recently. We have 7, maybe 8 if you include Arizona in the list here, teams that really have been good enough to be a 1 seed this year. Maybe some of this will play out, especially with Virginia and Duke having to meet and determine who wins the ACC tournament. But the rest of these teams could all win out and present really one of our strongest cases of 1 and 2 seeds ever.
Yeah, and it kind of goes down after that. I mean, like Warren said, there's the top 8 is pretty distinct. It's just kind of gets down to how you order them. So.
Right. Well, what we want to do tonight, as we do most weeks, is go through all the major conferences, and let's start at the top with the number 1 team overall in its conference, and that's Kentucky and the SEC, where we're still looking at at least 5, maybe 6-bid SEC this year, which is miles above where they've been about the last 7 or 8 years. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Oh, no. Okay. I was wondering if you were going anywhere with that, or if you just wanted to move on to what's next.
You can comment if you like.
Right. Wow. But anyway, it's just kind of weird being down here in the South, which is normally football country, seeing these SEC arenas rammed full all of a sudden. It's almost like bizarro word. Ole Miss, and that's the thing, Ole Miss kind of stumbled out of the gate. They lost to Charleston Southern, and I think they dropped another game. But what have they won? I should know this. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think they've won 8 of their last 10. They had a real nice win over the weekend. They're really playing well, and not only is Ole Miss going to get in, they might be wearing white in that opening round. I know you, Chad, don't like them as much, but I think Kentucky. One of my things about Kentucky is that I think everybody watched that Kansas game and got real enamored with it because they just blew Kansas's doors off. Kentucky is the overall number 1 team. They would be on top of the S curve. I don't think there's any question about that. But they have shown that they are beatable. They went to Florida, who's not a tournament team, and they almost lost that. They went to Texas A&M, and I think needed overtime to a team that's on the fringe of the bubble. Ole Miss almost beat them in Rupp Arena. So Kentucky can be beaten. And I know that with the injury, they haven't looked as good. I think if Virginia wins out or Duke wins out and goes for the double, you might be able to make a case that they deserve it over an unbeaten Kentucky team. Now, they won't get it, but I think that the paper is going to be better if that happens.
Well, we have a Kentucky team here that I see no reason why they will not be 34-0 heading into the NCAA tournament. Yeah, they've played down to their competition. On the other hand, they've won these close games, and that was probably my biggest, I guess I must say, fear for Kentucky losing a game either in the SEC tournament or in the NCAA tournament was they would just blow through everybody this year and not know how to win a close game. They have done that. They won close games at LSU, at Florida, against Ole Miss, against A&M. And, I mean, not much left in the schedule. There's a road trip to Georgia. That's their toughest road game, a home game against Arkansas, which is their toughest home game left. But and then the SEC tournament. I don't know. Warren, what do you think about this Kentucky team this year? Do you think this is they're going to? Do you think the 40-0 is realistic, or?
Well, it's definitely possible. I kind of thought back to kind of having the easy I mean, not an easy schedule, but you play with easy wins, and then you get in the tournament and kind of get tripped up, and that sort of reminds me of like Wichita State last year. I mean, because I think they were really good, but the competition for the last 20 games wasn't really there for them. So, I mean, Kentucky, like you just pointed out, I don't think that's going to happen to them. They've had the close ones. They've figured out how to win. So there's nothing really in their way, to go undefeated.
Right. All right. As far as the rest of the SEC goes...
And as soon as you say that, then they'll lose.
Yeah, they're at Tennessee, I believe, tomorrow night, weather permitting. I know that Kentucky and Tennessee are both being hit by this snowstorm here, and we don't know if Kentucky's actually going to be able to make it to Knoxville, but assuming they do, they're playing tomorrow night in Knoxville. As far as the rest of the SEC goes, I really like the way this Arkansas team, and David mentioned the Ole Miss team as well, has been playing. The team that I think is the biggest bubble team right now in the SEC is this Texas A&M team. I kind of call this the most vanilla profile, I think, in all of college basketball right now. They haven't done anything bad, but they really haven't done anything good either. And I don't really know what you do with a team like that when you try to determine whether they belong in the field or not.
And that's just it. And if you think procedurally at that point, because essentially at that point they're putting teams in. I mean, they start off with the 36 that are in the field no matter what, and then every time one of those 36 wins an automatic bid, the committee adds a team. I think from what we've seen in the past, you have to give them a reason to put you in, and not just a reason for them to not take you out. Does that make sense? So A&M has got to do something. They did. I mean, they racked up some pretty impressive losses that would have been good wins had they won them. But, their best win is at LSU. Is that going to be enough to jump them over everybody else that's on the bubble when they're sitting there looking for, as those teams win the conference tournaments, okay, who do we put in? Who do we put in? A&M has to do something. These are the kinds of teams that are typically projected in by a lot of people like us, but then ultimately the committee does not take. I thought that was a fairly brilliant analysis. I don't know about that.
On that note, I thought we might want to move on to the next conference up, and if we're going to go right down the seed list.
What are you going to say? You just cut off what?
I'm sorry. Warren, I apologize if I cut you off there.
Oh, I was just going to say, I got them as about my third team out, and usually these kind of things work themselves out during the season, right? These teams that are last 8, before you know it, they're either in or they're way out.
Right.
Well, and what you may also see is a couple of crazy upsets in some of the conference tournaments. If somebody like UNLV suddenly wins the Mountain West, or if Davidson comes out of nowhere and wins the A10 tournament, that knocks a couple teams out. And and Texas A&M no longer being a debate because there's no longer room for them to even be considered.
Right.
Right. They're not going to look at a 60 RPI team with a weak resume then.
Right.
They better do something.
But I want to move on to the next conference up, which will be the ACC, which has two right now of the 4-1 seeds that I think everybody's predicting, with both Virginia and Duke here, along with some pretty good teams with Louisville, Notre Dame, North Carolina. I guess Virginia now has a 2-game lead in the conference over Notre Dame, 2.5 games over Duke.
Yeah.
Almost a little bit strange to be talking about a 1 seed for a team that's 2 games out of first place in its conference.
Has that happened before? Where's Colin when you need him? I don't know that kind of trivia, but okay. Here's the argument for a 1 seed, and we say it every week, but it's true. They won at Virginia, the only team that has. They won at Whiskey, the only team that has, and they won at Louisville, like one of only 2 teams that has, or one of only 3 teams. I'm sorry. So, like, when you look at the fact that those 3 teams have a combined total of 5 losses, and 3 of them are to Duke, that is just outstanding. And they did lose at Notre Dame in a close game, but they just barely squeaked by them at home in the rematch. Duke did. I think it was 50-19 at one point. It got so bad I changed the channel.
Yeah, and then Virginia is just continuing to roll. I thought they had a potential trap game tonight, I guess, against this Pittsburgh team that was coming off of a pretty good win and had started to, I guess, get a little bit onto my radar whether or not they could go on a run here and maybe put themselves in NCAA tournament contention. Pitt kept it close for a while, but ended up winning by 12 in the end. I'm sorry, Virginia ended up winning by 12 in the end.
Yeah. And when you look at this Pitt team, how different would it be had they avoided losses to Hawaii and Virginia Tech? Suddenly then what would their overall? I mean, they'd be 19-8, they'd be 7-6 in the conference. Their numbers would look a lot better. Suddenly, it's just weird. You got to win the little ones too.
Right. I mean, when you look at the Pitt, they have 2 huge home wins over Notre Dame and North Carolina, but really, when you throw in those 2 bad losses at the bottom, they're not in any serious contention, in my opinion, at this point. No. And really, the rest of their schedule, their only team that we're looking at a potential NCAA tournament team they've left is a home game against Miami, who is right there on the bubble at this point. So I don't know that, short of doing something in the ACC tournament, they're going to have any more chances to make a run.
Yeah, Warren, I hadn't looked at your bracket yet. What have you done with Miami? It is the most schizophrenic, all over the place, inconsistent profile I have ever seen.
That's a great way to put it. I got Miami as my last team in, and probably was a toss-up between a couple. So, and then today, I mean, they just squeak. Oh, double overtime, right? So
yeah, to mighty Boston College in front of a crowd of dozens.
Yep. So they're not in a good spot right now.
Right. Well, they've proven that they can win the national title with their decisive win at Duke, and they've proven that they could not make the quarterfinals of the OVC tournament. All in the same year. I mean, good grief.
One other team right here on the bubble in the ACC that I think is worth mentioning, probably the biggest win by any bubble team this past weekend. NC State won at Louisville. And now when you add to that a home win over Duke as well, that they've got as good of a top of the resume as anybody they'd be talking about for the bubble. The problem is they're also sitting here with 11 losses, which is a huge number, especially because they'd probably be looking at a 13 or 14 loss team come tournament time.
Yeah. And again, some of their losses were just gut-wrenching. By 4 to Virginia, by 2 to Carolina, by 3 to Notre Dame. 1 to Wofford, although, I mean, I think none of us were too upset to see Wofford win that game, I don't think. But, at 15-11, I mean, again, I always say the number one rule is that you can't think categorically. Having said that, I'm going to think categorically. when you get up in the 13, 14 losses, that is a lot of losses. That is more than what you normally see or ever see an at-large team rack up.
Now, when you talk about that, though, I mean, looking right off of Warren's site right here, NC State's in there at the number 3 strength of schedule in the country as well right now. So
Yeah.
if anybody's going to get in with 12 or 13 losses, I think a number 3 strength of schedule or higher is what you've got to be.
Yeah. And they always say that, they want you to schedule hard, and I believe them based on they certainly don't want you to schedule weak. Yeah.
With that, if we want to move on to another conference, let's move on to the let's move over to the Big 12 now, which is probably the number 1 conference overall, top to bottom in the country. Although it may not get the most bids and it may not have a number 1 seed in it, but Kansas now sitting with is back up to number 1 in the RPI. I think they'd bounced down to second very briefly behind Kentucky.
Yeah. And again, it's like when you have 5 teams in a conference that are looking like protected seeds, which you do in this one. It's like West Virginia is one of the weaker teams in the league, but they're ranked 23rd in the country, and they're tied with Kansas right now. It's a fairly decent league. Fairly decent.
I agree. It's really strong league. I mean, if I don't look at Kansas's overall record of if I don't look at the 4 losses.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a 1 seed.
It is, because what do they have?
25, I mean, you got, 7 top 25 wins?
Yeah.
That's an awesome resume.
Yeah, it's more than anybody else on the one line has, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you've got not only all those top 25 wins, you have 5 wins away from home against those top 25 teams. And that's an amazing number there.
Yeah.
The losses even, you lost at Oklahoma State, at Iowa State, and at a neutral court to Kentucky. I don't know that there's any team in the country that wouldn't have lost, those 3 games if they played this entire schedule. The other loss at Temple was kind of inexcusable, but they just didn't bother making that trip for some reason.
Right. If we were a real professional podcast, I would know the answer to this. What is Iowa State and Oklahoma State's combined home record? Has anybody beaten them at home? Because essentially, of their 4 losses, 1 was to Kentucky, who hasn't lost to anybody, and the other 2 might be in situations where those teams haven't lost at home. Did somebody beat Oklahoma? No, did somebody beat Oklahoma State at home?
Iowa State has not lost at home.
Yeah.
The other team you mentioned here was Oklahoma State, and they've lost twice at home. Actually.
Oh, okay.
They lost to both Maryland and Oklahoma at home.
Well, that throws my theory out the window. This Kansas team was terrible. Losing that game like that. But still, I mean, those are really, really hard games to win.
But what are you saying, Oklahoma? I think Oklahoma only has 1 loss at home.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Oklahoma's only loss at home was the K-State loss, and they still have their home game against Kansas coming up March 7th, and what might be Kansas's next big test after the one tonight that West Virginia is giving them as we do this. West Virginia and Kansas, like you said, are tied 49 here.
And the thing about the Big 12 is that it seems like we get this every year with one of the leagues where winning the Big 12 tournament might be a harder road than winning a regional. When you look at just how good, I mean, that's the thing. You only have like 2 or 3. You only have 1 2 seed and 1 3 seed in a regional. This is a conference that might have multiple. It's just going to be a rough road.
After the Big 12, let's move right on over to the Big 10. Another team that we discussed already as a possible 1 seed candidate is this Wisconsin team. I'll tell you quite honestly, I'm just more and more impressed with this Wisconsin team every time they go out there. They did lose a game at my alma mater, Rutgers. Now I'll give them credit that they were missing their top 2 players for that game, and so if you kind of scratch that one off, all they did was lose to Duke. And probably the biggest hole in Wisconsin's resume is the fact that the Big Ten is slightly more down this year than it's been in past years. So even though they haven't lost a Big Ten game other than the game at Rutgers. They don't have any big wins. The Big Ten win is at Iowa.
Yeah. I was going to say their best true road win is against Iowa, which is good, but is it one seed good? I mean, I say that realizing Gonzaga doesn't have one any better than that. By that I mean a true road win. I don't think, do they? No, the winning at the Johnnies wasn't as good as winning at Iowa. I don't know, but yeah, I think that the lack of high caliber road wins might hurt them when you line them up against what Virginia and Duke and Kentucky have done. But again, and even Villanova has done more. They just won at Butler. Like Wisconsin doesn't have a true road win as good as that.
All right. Warren, any thoughts on the Big Ten and on Wisconsin here?
Well, I mean, on my latest bracket, I got 8 Big Ten teams in. That's I mean, a lot of them are, sort of on the bubble. I got Purdue right in at the end, and Illinois is down there too. But I like Wisconsin, and then Indiana, Ohio State, Iowa, sort of in the middle, middle pack teams.
Well, you mentioned that Iowa team. Let me mention them briefly here because this is a team that has pretty much had a disastrous week this week. Losing at home to Minnesota, then at Northwestern. I mean, I thought that a week ago I was praising them how I thought they were playing as well as anybody in the Big Ten. Now, as you look at them right now, they've now lost 5 out of 7 games, and I think they're still safely in the field. But I think that another mess up or two, and they could be squarely on the bubble at this point. It's just a team that's starting to fall apart here.
Right. Is this a trend? We saw this from Fran McCaffrey's team last year. Went from ranked in the teens to the first 4.
And we didn't even think they belonged to the tournament last year. We were surprised that they made it.
Yeah. What were you saying, Nolan? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah. It's definitely sort of a free-for-all resume. 10 losses now. I mean, and I don't know, let's see, 4-6 in your last 10. That's better turn it around.
And what's the temperature? You mentioned that loss to Minnesota. In addition to it being damaging, I know it's not as heated as Iowa State, Iowa, but I mean that one is. Their feelings were hurt a little bit after that. To lose at home to a conference rival, and get knocked back closer to the bubble, not a good week.
We also mentioned this Purdue team here, and this is probably maybe just as difficult of a resume to deal with as this Miami resume. Again, you have some nice stuff at the top, including home wins over Indiana, Ohio State, NC State. Even more importantly, you're sitting here with a Big Ten record of 9-4 in conference, which is tied for second place. But then you look down the bottom of the profile, and they lost home games to North Florida and Gardner-Webb.
Well, North Florida is one of the better teams in the A-Sun.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a 15 seed beat them at home.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Gardner-Webb's probably not even getting into the field. So, wow. Yeah, they've had better days. The thing about Purdue is that when you look at their schedule the rest of the way, it's full of winnable games. And if they get all of them, or at least most of them, I mean, their record's going to balloon up, their RPI is going to balloon up because, again, to go from 17-9 to like 22-10 or whatever, it's going to boost it up more than a team that already has a high winning percentage. They're going to be looking pretty attractive. They're 9-4 in the Big Ten. Now, I realize that the schedule's unbalanced, and it's unbalanced in their favor. And if I'm smart enough to figure that out, then so's the committee. But they could potentially have some pretty good things on their profile by the time it's over.
Yeah, and you mentioned their upcoming schedule. What they're most lacking right now, I think, is a top 50 road win. They have 3 chances, though, at Indiana, at Ohio State, at Michigan State. They hold serve at home, would take 1 out of those 3. They're now looking at 12 wins in the Big Ten Conference, including a top 50 road win. it's going to be tough for the committee not to take him,
You would,
despite
yeah,
holding the nose at the bottom of that profile.
right. Oh, oh well. I mean,
Well,
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, you don't just walk into the arena and beat North Florida. It does require a light jog. Oh.
over in the Big East, we talked about this Villanova team very briefly already. Also, as we are recording this right now, Butler is down 4 points at Creighton, who has been a bit of a spoiler this year. Has picked up a pretty couple of big home wins, including a win early this season over Oklahoma.
Yes.
Now, the big news with Butler was they had an injury. David, you know a little more about that.
Yeah, it's just they're going to be without a key player between 2 and 4 weeks. He was one of their better shooters. He averaged in double figures. I mean, I would think that they could get by without him. I was still thinking they were going to win this one, but Creighton, despite having a pretty bad year overall, is still 9-5 at home. They do have the win over Oklahoma at home. I mean, they are capable of beating good teams at home. They're just not capable of doing much else. Spoiler is the right word for it. They're in the Big East, despite being neither large nor eastern in its location. And, yeah, they come in there, and they're kind of at the bottom of the league, and they're putting bad losses on teams in the conference. So, yeah, spoiler's the right word for it. But, again, I really like this Butler team. When they get back to full strength, I think that they really could be dangerous. And then Nova, we talked about. I mean, they're just kind of distancing themselves from everybody else, as is Creighton, but they're just going in the other direction as far as the distance goes.
Yeah, I could see the Creighton upset. I mean, they all watched Kyle Korver last night and had happy dreams after that. And now they're coming out on fire.
Right.
Good point. Yeah, that's Andrew Kravitz is the injury for Butler, by the way.
It was in the second half. Well, that was the thing. After he went down, they still played really well without him against Nova. Now, granted, they were at home, but that's why I didn't think they would struggle too badly tonight, but they are.
Yeah, kind of on the other end of the Big East here is the team that has completely imploded, has now lost 5 straight games following a loss at Villanova tonight, the Seton Hall team. On top of that, Sterling Gibbs in the game tonight decided to throw a punch right at Archie Diakono's face, and we may not be seeing him play for a few games, if at all, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's a flagrant 2. I believe he's out the next game. Chances are he might be out in addition to that. He has come out and apologized. I just saw on television he's even tried to reach out to the guy. So, I mean, yeah, it's his fault for snapping, and he needs to serve the consequences. But at the same time, you kind of applaud somebody that messes up and then takes it upon themselves to acknowledge that they messed up. But Seton Hall is, I mean, there's a right direction and a wrong direction, and God, they're going in the latter direction fast right now.
Yeah, talk about Jaron Senior left the team last week. This Seton Hall team may not be in any postseason tournament at all after looking like they were a solid NCAA tournament just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, and they just got beaten badly. I mean, they were losing badly before he accidentally punched him in the face going for the ball.
Let's talk about the bubble, though, in the Big East. And I think it's 2 teams we got to discuss here, the Xavier team and this St. John's team. And starting with Xavier, we were talking a few weeks ago when they won at Georgetown that was the big hole in their profile, that they went and they won at Georgetown. They got the big road win. Since then, they lost at home to Creighton. They lost at Seton Hall. They're now sitting here with 4 sub-100 losses, one of them being a home loss. I don't know that they're there yet. I think they got a lot of way. They need some big wins.
I don't think they're there yet, but I think they're there in the sense that if the season ended today, they would be in. I mean, I'm thinking 10-11 line, but I still think, well, you win a big game like Georgetown, you got to go out and celebrate, and they've just been drunk for a couple weeks. That's all.
If you look ahead at their schedule here, they're at Cincinnati, a non-conference huge rivalry game coming up Wednesday night. Then they've got Butler at home, at St. John's, Villanova at home, at Creighton, and that's the end of the season. They cannot afford to lose. I don't know if they can even afford to lose 3 out of 4, but I mean they could lose 4 out of their next 4, and that could be the end of the season for the Musketeers.
It could be, but let's just, like we always say, it's not easy to get to the tournament, and to get there you have to win games that are not easy to win. Cincinnati isn't exactly tearing up the place lately. They need to go there and beat them. It's odd. Well, it's a series that was moved for rivalry week since we've had so much conference realignment. We just don't have rivalries anymore, so we need to move out of conference games to rivalry week to fill it out. But that's an interesting game. I mean, that one, the rivalry aside, and do you even put it aside, that one's big for both. I know we're going to talk about the America East in a little bit, but like you said, that's a game Xavier really needs to win, and not just for bragging rights. They really need that one, don't they?
Yeah.
I think that. Sorry, Warren, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think they do. I think it's. I mean, Cincinnati could lose that game, but Xavier really can't. They need that win on their resume.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just, especially with Georgetown kind of not being as powerful of a win anymore. I think that Georgetown has slipped up a little bit in the last few weeks. Still safely in the field, but not quite as strong.
And again,
on the other,
if you can't go to Creighton and win, and I know Butler's not doing it now, this is a sub-NIT team. If you're a tournament team, you need to go on the road and win that. Come on, X.
St. John's is the other team I mentioned here briefly. I think that St. John's right now does have a better profile than Xavier, mostly because they actually won at Xavier already this year, along with a sweep of Providence. But this is also another team that has some work ahead of it, including having to play Georgetown twice still in the season as they get both games against the Hoyas late in the year.
How did that happen? Oh, well, I'm not in charge of scheduling. Yeah, I agree. Like that, I think the Johnnies are in a little bit better shape than Xavier. They both have the same number of road wins, but St. John's won at Providence. I believe only 2 other teams have. They won at Xavier. Case closed. I mean.
We mentioned the American briefly. Let's move over and talk about them a little bit here.
I know you don't want to.
I know I don't want to. We just mentioned Cincinnati a little bit, but let's start with Warren. I noticed that one of your last teams that just missed out was this Tulsa team, which I have not liked all season. I only had them in my fields for a little while during the middle of the season because they were undefeated in the conference, and I thought that gave them a few extra bonus points. Now that they have lost a couple conference games, I'd like to just forget about them entirely, but I don't think you have. So, what is it with this Tulsa team?
That's a great question. There's not much. There's not much there, but I mean, I always get right here. This bubble, the last 4 in, the last 4 out. I mean, every time.
Just getting a drink. Sorry.
Every year about this time, I go, I'm not seeing anybody there that's wowing me, and it always seems to work itself out, and that some of these teams are going to win and actually prove that they need to be in, and others are going to get bumped out, and eventually bumped out by conference, by the automatic bids. I mean, it just sort of works itself, and Tulsa's got nothing. If right now you're 4 spots out, I mean, you need a lot.
Right. Just real quick on this Tulsa team, I think there are some things about them that will impress the committee. The first being that Frank Haith is the coach. Like we always say that they are impressed when teams win games that are hard to win. Well, when Frank Haith is your coach, it's hard to win. Yet Tulsa's managed to win several games with him as head coach. So you got to give him credit for that.
I guess you could also throw in there that they won a game that they lost a game that doesn't even hurt them one bit in the RPI for losing when they lost that Southeastern Oklahoma State game as well.
Well, it will hurt them with the committee, very, very much so.
And I think that's one of the reasons you see in terms of some of the various rankings that their RPI is a lot higher than some of their other ratings.
Yeah.
Does the NPI account for that loss? Or
Let's see.
The
NPI actually has them up higher than the RPI, so
really.
okay.
I guess.
So
I
you
don't
didn't factor in losing to, was it Southeast Oklahoma State?
Southeast Oklahoma State, Dennis
know.
Rodman's.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much all the non-division ones are thrown out, but that's right there at the end of the resume. You know, it says 0-1 against non-division one. That's,
Yeah.
If
no
that's
one's gonna.
one or two teams the committee might have some discussions about with non-D1 losses, the other being a potential automatic bid out of the MAC to Bowling Green, who lost the game to Ferris State. But
God.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah,
as far as the top the American goes, SMU is just looking better and better, I think, every week. I don't know that they can get up into the protected seed range, but it'll be interesting if they do win every game the rest of the way, including winning the conference tournament, if they get some consideration for a top 4 seed.
I don't see him getting up that high. I will say this: as excited as everyone was about SMU last year, they're better this year. Only somehow they seem to be laying in the weeds this year. And maybe it's just I don't pay enough attention to the national polls, but they don't seem to have that buzz factor or that wow factor with everybody that they had a year ago. Is there anything to that, or am I just imagining that? Anyway.
Well, I mean, that if you look at their games, I mean, the fans are growing wild there, and it's.
Oh yeah, they're going wild there. I think they're sold out all year this year too, so good for them.
And since when has college basketball mattered in Dallas ever that I can remember? So,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not the Dallas Cowboys, it doesn't matter there, I thought.
Yeah. Okay.
The other team worth a brief mention here in the American is this Temple team. That's a team that is not picking up good wins, but it's not losing games. In fact, they've now won, I believe, 7 straight. And when everyone else is losing, the teams that just keep winning, even if they're winning against garbage, slowly creep up there into the bubble and into the field. And I think that's exactly what's happening with this Temple team right now.
Yeah, they really. I don't think either of us, and I can't speak for Warren, but like I expected absolutely nothing out of Temple this year. We talk about impressing coaching jobs. How about the job Fran Dunphy has done with Temple, considering just how awful they were a year ago? I mean, they were set your face on fire bad a year ago, and now they're inside the bubble, I think, by just about everyone's measurements.
I agree. It just really has been and I've been impressed. I mean, I'm right here right on the outskirts of Big 5 country here, only about an hour from Philadelphia, and I figured we'd be talking Villanova, and that's it this year because we knew St. Joe's wouldn't be good this year. Didn't expect anything from LaSalle or from Penn,
Right.
and the fact that Temple is right there in the national in the discussion for a bid is shocking to me, and I mean, it all comes down to that Kansas win. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about that if they hadn't won that game, but
Probably not.
I'm still shocked by that game.
Yeah.
Guess let's move over to the one other major conference here. There's a couple more we still want to discuss before we're done, but the Pac-12 conference.
That's not major.
It's alleges to be major. It alleges it's a BCS, automatic qualifier, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Arizona, is a team that I actually predicted was my preseason pick to win it all. Actually, is these Wildcats, and they've done a lot of good stuff this year. But they're sitting here. They're the only team that would talk about for a 1 or a 2 seed with 3 losses to teams that we are not going to be otherwise discussing. When they lost at Vegas, at Oregon State, and at Arizona State. 3 really perplexing losses for a team that's otherwise played great all season, I thought.
Yeah, they really have. I mean, outside of those 3, and all of them were fairly close. Well, the one at Oregon State was, and then the one at Arizona State. And again, I feel like I have to say this every week. The Pac-12, it might not be as good as what it's been in the past or what we thought it was going to be, but it is the home of the greatest piece of fandom in the history of sports, and that is the curtain of distraction. It is hilarious. It is great. That alone makes it a major conference.
Yeah, Warren, I don't know if you've seen this or not. If not, you should Google it when we're done. There's some videos out there. It is absolutely amazing what they do at Arizona State to distract free throw shooters. The funniest thing I've seen in a long time.
I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's better than anything. I mean, if you're in the sports history, it's better than the Dodger Symphony. It's better than anything in the history of sports. It's the greatest thing ever. We just need to, because there isn't really much else to talk about in the Pac-12 other than that distraction.
Well, I guess there's a couple of things we should talk about. The first being the after Arizona, this Utah team. And this Utah team is a profile that I keep looking at, and I say, what have they really done that's gotten them, sitting there with an RPI of 9? I know you run the site with the numbers on it, Warren. Can you explain to me why this is according to the RPI and according to most power rankings out there, this is a top 10 Utah team when all they've done is beaten Wichita State and UCLA at home?
Yeah, I was a little distracted by the curtain of distraction.
That's understandable.
Yes.
Because
I told you, it's fantastic. Whoever came up with that.
Because is there always an Elvis as part of this?
No, it's something different every time. Like, you just never know what it's going to be.
Just as you're going to shoot, something strange comes out of the curtain. If I'm a free throw shooter, I just drop the ball and I fall down laughing. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's not always Elvis. I mean, sometimes you just never know what it's going to be. Like, they had Darth Vader once. They had, like, sword fight. I mean, it was jousting. I mean,
we're actually trying to work on get David Griggs to be behind the curtain one of these times. But we haven't been able to get that arranged quite yet.
Oh my God! Yeah, those kids are hilarious. That is the funniest thing. It's a shame that their team isn't any good. It really is. Yeah.
So you said something about Utah, I think.
Yeah.
I was just bringing up here, getting undistracted. Utah sitting here as a top 10 team in RPI in most power ratings, and all they've really done is beaten Wichita State and UCLA at home. I really have not been able to figure out how they got these ratings this high. I know it's just a numbers game, but I don't see this as anywhere near a top 10 team, in my opinion.
No, I can agree. I mean, it's sort of, it's in the numbers. They haven't lost anybody, really outside of what the top. Am I right? The top 50 teams?
Yeah, they don't. Don't have any home losses.
They've avoided bad losses for the most part.
Yeah, they've really avoided. I mean, their losses, Kansas and at Arizona, are two of the four.
At Kansas, at Arizona, at San Diego State. So just 4 top 50 losses. I mean, it's all just sort of like buried in the numbers. Gets them a 9 in the RPI, but that doesn't guarantee anything.
Right.
Where would you put them in the field right now? What type of seed would you give them?
Well, I gave them a 3.
Okay.
But there's just, it's just where they sort of fell in.
Yeah.
I'm with you in that there's, you expect something special right there, but there's not a whole lot. It might be the wrong spot for them.
Right.
Because the committee's going to do what we just did.
Yeah, they're going to look at it.
Well, and that's important. The committee does go a lot further than just power ratings and overall record. They really delve into these teams, look at every game they played, look at who was healthy, who wasn't healthy for those games, and all kinds of other data as well.
Of course, this year they might not get the bracket finished on time. They may be in there watching the curtain of distraction. Well,
as far as the bottom of the rest of, I guess, the bubble in the Pac-12 goes, I think there's 3 teams here we're discussing. Both UCLA and Oregon, who kind of seemed to be out of it a couple weeks ago, have both pulled themselves up right up in the bubble discussion. I have UCLA. I think UCLA, having beaten Oregon over the weekend, has moved above them. And the other team is a Stanford team that I think is about to fall off the face of the planet, but is still, has one fingertip hanging onto that bubble cliff right now.
This past week or two, probably two, if Stanford were a sled dog, you would have just shot it. I mean, good grief, they have gotten bad quickly. It's not like they're playing I mean, it isn't Texas bad, where Texas struggles to get wins against teams that are protected seeds. I mean, Stanford has just collapsed. Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Stanford's now lost 4 out of 5, including a loss at Colorado and a loss at Washington State.
The Surgeon General strongly advises you do not lose to Washington State. Oh, wow.
I mean, Stanford does still have some good things at their profile, including the win at Texas. They also have, uh, 3 other top 100 wins away from home, although none against tournament teams. But and it's really, it's like you pulling teeth here, and you're trying to figure out, versus these other profiles like Texas A&M's, who's worth putting in, and you at least have a little bit of something to go there with there on Stanford, and that's why I think they're
Yeah.
still worth looking at, but maybe not much more than that.
Okay.
right.
The way they're playing. Oh, wow. Big finish coming up here.
Butler.
Kansas and West Virginia.
Oh,
West
wow.
Virginia just won. They hit it. Yeah. So, man.
Well, I saw Butler just went ahead, but now Creighton got them tied. So
Yeah.
So we
it's
everything we said about Kansas earlier, just forget all that. They've now lost another game.
Yeah. It was in the final seconds, and then West Virginia scored. Kansas got the ball down and got a layup up on the rim, but it didn't go in. So pretty big finish. Anyway, yeah. We're coming to you live, by the way, right now. If you're watching this tomorrow,
We're still live.
we're still live.
Well, let's run through 2 more conferences here, and then we'll talk about a few other teams. But the Mountain West Conference, while we're out, talk about the West. We had really, I mean, San Diego State is winning this conference, and I think that everyone pretty much agrees that San Diego State team, if they slip up in the conference tournament, is going to be good enough to get in the field. Colorado State and Boise State are the other 2 teams I think worth mentioning. I don't think Wyoming is anymore. I think Wyoming has just too much bad stuff on their resume.
Yeah, and fortunately, like as a fan, Wyoming is just atrocious to watch. It's like you want to pour acid in your eyes. It is so slow and monotonous, and when they score 12 in the first half, you wonder how they got so many. But yeah, I got to admit, Colorado State, I still like them. I still think they're good. Larry Eustachy has done a good job with that program since taking over for Tim Miles. I am a little surprised that they're just 8-5 in the Mountain West. I thought that they would not keep pace with San Diego State, but be a little bit further inside the bubble than what they are. They struggled in games that I didn't think they would.
Right, and just looking ahead on Colorado State's schedule, they really should not lose again before the Mountain West Tournament. They're at Fresno, which has been a bit of a trap for a couple teams this year. Home against Air Force and San Jose, at Nevada, and at Utah State. They can't afford any of those losses. They need to win these next 5, and probably need to win at least 1 game in the Mountain West Tournament to feel safe, though. But I think that they've done enough that I think they will be in the field at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know it's a rivalry. The 2 losses to Wyoming, is that hurting them or is it just not helping them?
I don't know that's going to kill them. I think the loss to New Mexico may be a little worse than either. I mean, it is worse than either of those losses. I would really like to see a top 100 road win on this profile here for Colorado State, and the best chance for that is a neutral court win in the Mountain West Tournament at this point. So that's why they really need to win these games at Fresno, at Nevada, and at Utah State, I think, just to at least have a few more road wins somewhere on the profile.
Yeah. Boise, we are miles apart on them. I think they're on the bubble, but inside it. You don't even have them close, do you, Chad?
I would have ranked them about 6 or 7 teams out of the field right now. You look at this Boise team, has lost at Fresno, home to Utah State, and neutral court to Loyola Chicago. Those are 3 bad wins, offset by what have they done good? They beat Colorado State at home, they beat San Diego State at home, and that's it. And I need more than that if you're going to offset 3 bad games. They have a game at Vegas. They have a game at San Diego State still left. They win both of those, I definitely want to talk about them again. But that
Yeah.
Fresno State game this weekend was disastrous for them, I thought.
Yeah, that really was. I mean, and it wasn't just an off night. It was they got. I mean, it was a really off night, but it wasn't that Fresno played up. And then even when they were in a situation to win the game, they just crumbled. I mean, they just curled up into a ball almost. And it's like, come on, you're not. It was Fresno State. They did have the win at St. Mary's, who I know is not a tournament team, but that's still. I think the committee will give them some credit for that, simply because of how hard it is to win at St. Mary's. I think what it comes down to with me is that I don't dislike them as much as the other teams on the bubble.
I'm not certain that the St. Mary's argument works this year. St. Mary's also has losses to Pepperdine and Northern Arizona at home this year, and I just don't think it's
nobody's
as hard. I don't think it's and they're going to have a loss to Gonzaga come next week at home as well.
Yeah.
So it's going to be 4 home losses, and 2 of those home losses coming outside the top 100.
Yeah. Where did you have this team, this Boise State team? Were they in your field?
I'll tell you exactly where I had them. I had Oregon, Minnesota, Davidson, Stanford, Tulsa, and George Washington all above them as teams that were not in my field, but I like better than Boise.
Yeah. Warren, did you have them in?
They were right outside. I had my last 4 were BYU, Oregon, Texas A&M, Tulsa, and then probably Boise State. I got sort of a yeah.
They're a bracketing nightmare.
It's funny now. I look at Boise State and like Xavier. Then it's like
it's tough, yeah. But let's move on to the one last multi-bid conference we want to discuss here, and that's the Atlantic 10. And I know people that have been watching this show a lot know that I've been screaming that this Davidson team does not deserve any consideration whatsoever, that they're awful.
You're just doing that to annoy me.
But I just mentioned them as a team that I have, within 4 or 5 teams of making the field right now, which kind of surprised me when I did my latest projections. But if you're going to look at some of these other teams like Texas A&M, you got to look at this Davidson team. And I hate to say it, I really do. I don't think they're in right now, but they've got a game coming up at GW. They've got a game at Rhode Island. They've got VCU at home. They've got chances to pick up a few more top 50 and top 100 wins.
And they need them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, and I'll ask for Warren the backup, take notes if you feel like that you're going to have a good year. Davidson's out-of-conference schedule did nothing to help them. You have to make a case for yourself at some point. They basically took a pass on making any sort of case for themselves other than going to Virginia. But, I mean, when you're racking up wins against UCF and College of Charleston and Niagara, Campbell, who lost everybody from a team that wasn't that good anyway, Stetson, what are you doing? I mean, it's killing them. I mean, it's the weak teams from the weak leagues, and I think that that's really hurt their paper. And, again, I mean, just they've really put pressure on themselves because despite being 8-4 in the league and 1 game out of first, they still have a lot of work to do. Their margin for error is really small.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned that first place there. Right now, you actually have a 4-way tie for first in the A10.
Yeah.
Dayton and VCU, who I think we both agree are, I think most people agree are tournament teams. Rhode Island, who is kind of fallen off the pace, and this UMass team coming out of nowhere to suddenly be tied for first place as well. I don't think they're any type of serious contender for an NCAA bid either, though.
Well, what if UMass finishes in first? That's again, like when you're doing bracketology, which I hate that term and I hate thinking categorically, which is why I'm going to do it now. If they're an outright first place team, even with that weak profile, do you have to put them in?
I wouldn't. War, do you think differently?
Oh,
Was that a?
oh yeah. What do you think of UMass if they finish first outright in the Atlantic 10? Thank you.
Oh gosh.
He agrees with me.
Yeah.
So if they're gonna beat or if they win at Virginia Commonwealth,
Yeah. I mean, they would pretty
uh,
much have to.
yeah. So okay, if they win at Rhode Island, Virginia Commonwealth, okay, they're in. Maybe they're getting up to a gosh,
Yeah.
they got.
10. With those two, maybe a 9. What do you think?
They don't have 2 wins anywhere close to that good yet. I mean, they did beat Dayton, but it was at home. They need to win both those on the road, really, just to get inside the bubble, much less up to the 10.
VCU, I guess, is worth a bit of a mention here. They finally did pick up a win after losing Briante. I'm blanking on his name. To the injury. Trevian Graham was back. He's healthy again. But I still think this VCU team needs to prove that it can win with its current roster before they're going to get a seed that's anywhere close to what their RPI number is, which right now is at a 12.
Right, and that was big over the weekend, winning at George Washington. They needed to win away from home, and they did, and they beat, a bubble team. So it wasn't like they went out there and they beat Fordham. They beat somebody that with a pulse that has a fairly respectable road record. With that, this was a GW team that looked really good over in the Diamond Head Classic, had the 3 big wins, had the real big win against San Diego State, and it carried them a long way, but they have done really nothing else, and they have appeared to have digressed as the season has gone along. They just don't look that good this last week or two.
No, I would not have GW in the field right now, and I think that they've got to do a lot to get back into the field at the moment.
Yeah. So
a couple of teams we want to discuss here, moving away from the multi-bid conferences. First of all, in the West Coast Conference, Gonzaga. We already discussed a little bit that whether or not they should be a 1 seed. And Warren, you brought up this BYU team as a team on your radar, and I honestly have to admit that they are kind of getting onto my radar as well. The problem with them is that they're actually in 3rd place in the West Coast Conference, 2 games behind St. Mary's, who's in 2nd place. And I have a trouble with a team that finishes 2 games behind St. Mary's, who I'm not seriously considering actually being in the at-large bid discussion. Do you think that's a
pain it is to bracket them? Do you have any clue?
It is such a pain to bracket them.
Yeah.
That it's better to leave them out than put them in.
Yes, that's what I mean. I was not that I was rooting against them, but I was rooting against them for that reason.
Well, they've got the game February 28th at Gonzaga. That's a must-win for them, and I don't know that they're good enough to win the game, but they have the talent there with Tyler Hawes. I mean, it's a team that I think could win games in the tournament, but they just slipped up two times too many so far the regular season that they need.
Yeah, they are a little perplexing. Not as perplexing, at least not to me, as Nebraska, but this was a team that you would thought was going to be a lot better than what they've ended up being.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. The other thing is, with this BYU team, even if they lose this game to Gonzaga, they're a legitimate threat to win the West Coast Conference tournament as well. If somebody not Gonzaga is going to win it, it's going to be BYU, I think.
It very well could be.
The other 2 teams worth mentioning, of course, is the Missouri Valley Conference, Northern Iowa, Wichita State. I can't praise this Northern Iowa team enough, I don't think.
Yeah, and again, I mean, Ben Jacobson has done a phenomenal job. I don't think he's going to be mentioned in National Coach of the Year circles. But maybe he should be. He's got them way up in the rankings. Keep in mind, the league's a little stronger than it was last year. Wichita ran the table last year. This Northern Iowa team, and again, when it comes to merit, they're not as accomplished as Wichita, but when it comes to how good they can be on the floor, maybe they are. They lost in double overtime to VCU, and they lost by 2, I think, to Evansville. They're 4 points away from being undefeated. And this is a league that, while not a whole lot of tournament teams, it has a lot of teams in it that typically play really well at home, and they're just running through it. This is a very good Northern Iowa team.
I mean, they're going to Northern Iowa, Wichita State will play for the second time at the end of the season, probably play for a third time in the MVC title game. My thought right now is whoever ends up taking 2 out of 3 here will be a protected seed. The other one is probably looking at a 5 seed. That's kind of the way I've looked at it all season. I still think I go with the prediction here from the MVC.
Yeah. Now, paper aside, how good do you think this Northern Iowa team is? I think they're one of the 15 best teams easily.
I could see them in the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
I don't know that they're an Elite 8 team, but I think they're a Sweet 16 team.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a little bit strange this year that when we're looking at every other conference out there, I don't think right now, especially with Stephen F. Austin's loss over the weekend to Texas A&M Corpus Christi, that there is anybody out there from any other conference that is a serious at-large bid contender right now.
Probably not outside of like the multi-bid 9, or we need to come up with a name for that. The multi-bid leagues, and then outside of Gonzaga, UNI, and Wichita, probably not. Old Dominion certainly had things on their profile that would indicate they could get an at-large bid. The problem is they got in the conference and lost to a lot of crappy teams. I think they're 8-5. Is it 2 or 3 games behind La Tech now?
They're 3 games behind La Tech. I don't think they can catch La Tech even if they win out. And if they can't finish in first place or at least tied for it, they're not even going to get any consideration. I don't think that they deserve any consideration with their bad losses at this point.
Right. If you really use your imagination, like if it were debate class and you were given the assignment of making a case for Wofford, you might be able to do it just because they did win at NC State, but NC State has 6 home losses, so that's a hard sell. Iona, who I think is much fun as we like to have with Tim Kloos, they're really good, but again, they don't have the paper to. It's very hard to argue that they deserve to be inside the bubble. I don't know, Warren. Is there anybody that outside of like the multi-bid 9, other than the teams that we've mentioned in the rankings, that you think can get inside the bubble?
Not really. I mean, there's no one in my last 8 out.
Yeah.
Or there's nobody there. I mean, I know the teams you're talking about, but I think they're all just going to. They better win the tournament. Better win the tournament.
And the issue you run into if you're Iona, if you're Murray State, if you're Stephen F. Austin, if you have not made a case for yourself before conference play, you're not going to get the chance to do it in conference. And none of those teams really did. Wofford did have the 1 win, but that's really all they had.
Well, I guess on that note, that pretty much covers everything for this week. Once again, we want to encourage everybody to check out Warren Nolan's website if you've not done so already. It's really the number one site, especially for up-to-the-minute updates on RPI, NPI, scores. Everything is there. Also want to make just a quick mention that coming up this week on Wednesday night is one of the premier events of the entire sports year. David,
Cincinnati.
You know what I'm talking about. Of course, that is that pitchers and catchers are starting to report for spring training. Of course, North Carolina Duke coming up Wednesday night. You're probably going to hear about it a little bit over the next couple of nights. I would suspect.
The rivalry that has an entire week dedicated to it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, on that note, we want to wish everyone a good night. Any final comments from either one of you before we log off?
I've shared all the brilliance I have to share.
Okay. All right. Again, Warren, thanks for coming on. We really do appreciate it.
Kansas is still number 1 in the RPI.
Yeah. Are they really?
Despite
the loss, Kansas is still number 1.
And that means not much.
That means there's still a 2 seed. I think. I don't think this knocks them off the 2 line, but down to a 3. But I don't think this probably hurts their chances of getting a 1 seed at this point.
Agreed.
All right. Well, Again, once again, have a good night, everybody. We'll talk to you again real soon.